Hello, I'm Regina with AG Designs, and today we are going to make the Chelsea bag by Cee Jay. So with this purse, it's not that many pieces of material that you have to cut, and or the interfacing, all of that. It's a neat, quick bag that you can actually make. So just to give a little highlights on this bag, there is a different chain that we will make for this purse. When I made this the other night, I didn't have the right chain in stock, so I just used what I had so that I could finish the bag. With the pattern, you'll notice there are four grommets that need to go across the top so that your chain can run through. And you can see here I only did two because I didn't have the right size chain and or the chain in stock. So just to quickly go over the handbag, the supplies that are required in order to make this purse, and then we can get started. So with this purse, you will need a turn lock. All right, so this one is built with a turn lock. Now I did mine, of course, because I love pink. I did pink flowers, interfacing on the inside. There is a pocket that's built here at the bridge of the purse. And then there is enough room inside, you know, to put your wallet, cell phone, keys, lip gloss, lipstick, whatever you need to put in here. This is what the purse looks like, you know, from a side view and then from the back as well. Okay, so to go over the supplies that are required, let's do that really quickly, and then we can start making this purse. So for one thing, the purse uses a lot of glue. So you will need to have some type of purse glue. Now I use Barge. I get this off of Amazon. It is like a rubber cement type glue, and it's the type that when you put it on your product, you have to make sure that you're putting it on both sides that you want to glue. Meaning, if you want to put it on the edge of the material, wherever you're going to lay or fold that over, that piece has to also have the glue so that it can mesh together. So it normally takes about, once you put it on, about 4 minutes or so in order for, you know, the glue to activate to where it can stick. And once it folds over and stick, it's kind of stuck. So you have to make sure that's where you want it to be, right? So again, you can get this glue off of Amazon. It is the brand that I purchased. It's called Barge. This is a 32 ounce. I purchased a larger can because some of the wallets that I make as well take up a lot of glue also. Okay, to make the holes at the top of your bags, these are grommets. So what you'll need to have is a grommet press as well as the grommets to go in. Okay, so this is the grommet press that you will need, or there is a handheld one that kind of looks like a hole punch. So you'll need to have that as well, right? One of those so that you can put your, make your holes into your fabric. So once you punch the holes into the fabric and use the additional tools that comes with the grommet to, one, make sure that you can punch the hole in, and the other one will secure your grommets onto your material. And this is what it will end up looking like. So you have your hole through there. And this is the grommet that goes on the front and the back, okay? And that secures it so there's no fraying or anything like that, okay? So you're basically securing your hole. If you have bag tags, you want to make sure that you have one of your bag tags that can actually go onto your purse, right? If you're determining to sell them or you're just making them for yourself. You know, if you have a company, just make sure that you have some type of label that can acknowledge that that's your work and no one else's. Okay, you'll need to have, because like I said, it has a turn lock on it. You will need to have the turn lock and the associated pieces that goes with the turn lock so that you can put everything onto the purse. So it should be a 4-piece set. You will have your front plate that will go on the front part of your bag. And then you'll have your turn lock and your secure plate that goes on the other piece of the bag to allow the turn lock to come through. Okay, you will need your chain. I think the pattern calls for like a 40-something inch chain, so you will need your chain, and you can get this off of Amazon, or you can go to maybe one of your local bead stores that sells beads for bracelets, because I know I've seen chains in those type of stores. I just can't say if I've seen chains like where you can go and actually purchase at Joann's, Hobby Lobby, or Michael's. I've just never really looked for it, I guess. So I don't know if they're in there or not. You will need to have double-sided tape. So I have the 1/4 inch width, and then this one is the 3/4 1/4 inch width. Okay, so you'll need to have a skinny one, whether it's an 1/8 or a 1/4 for some of the material that you're going to use. Now, I have this pick tool that I use. I got it from Amazon, and it came in like a 5-pack of them. And this just kind of helps me when I'm going around the edging or the corners to kind of keep the material pushed down some so that I can sew it. Now, I will say my first trial bag, I had some issues going around the edge, and it's because of the way I cut the material. So just make sure you try and get your rounded corners cut on your material pieces so that way everything kind of molds together, because this is not a turnout birthing bag. This is a straightforward sew bag where you will just sew both pieces together from the outside, okay? You need to have your ruler, of course, and some scissors. Want to make sure you have some marking tools. I have chalk, and I also have my pen, right? Because if you need to mark little places for your center pieces on the front or underneath the bag, meaning your lining or what have you, then you can use pen. But for something that's gonna, you trying to match up on the outside of the bag, you may want to use chalk, okay? Because then you can just wipe that off. When I mentioned the grommets earlier, showing you this piece on what you will actually do, these are the grommets, right? So I buy the grommets off of Amazon. They come in various sizes. The size that I'm using today for this purse is the 1/2 inch, okay? And they're reasonable, not expensive at all. If you were to buy the grommet tool off of Amazon, they will give you some starter grommets with this machine. But I just like to also purchase more just so I have a complete, stock of what I need. So in case I need 5 or 10, I have enough to go around and do and not have to wait for orders to come in, things like that from the store in order to finish making that project. So, and speaking with, another thing, 2 things. Make sure you have some clips. I ordered these little plastic clips off of Amazon. Now, I will tell you, these purse clips, I started out with 2 jars. I'm down to 1 because they keep breaking, right? As you look at some of them, it just looks like, when something's stale or old, this is how they're kind of looking. And so when you put thick material or try to clamp thick material with this, sometimes they start to break and pop. So you may want to invest in the regular paper binding clips, like the little black ones, the little small black ones, or the medium-sized ones. I know that Dollar Tree also has some clips that I've purchased before from them, and they work pretty good too. But just be careful with these plastic ones when you're trying to use thick material, because of the fact that they pop or break, I should say, okay? And you'll also want to have some alcohol or acetone, because as you know, when you're using double-sided tape, it's sticky, and or glue. When you're sewing, if you're having to sew in wherever that tape or glue area is, then your needle is going to become very sticky. And then your thread is going to start sticking to it to where when you try to sew, it's like tugging along. And sometimes it pops your thread, and or it just does not sew right underneath. The top may look really nice, but the underneath just does not. So just make sure you have this handy so that you can go and wipe that needle to keep on going, right? So now when it comes down to the material, so you would have already cut all your material pieces out. Now, when I do cut the material or the patterns, I have, or I should say I keep everything in a folder together. But I also print another copy because you know how it's outlined in some of the pattern pieces? It'll have like the square within the square to show you where things need to be placed. Well, I print that page again so that I can cut that inside piece, right? So therefore, I can place that on the back side of the lining or the material and trace around so I know where my interfacing needs to go or where I'm going to glue down, you know, the piece, that type of thing, right? So in doing so, I have gone through and marked from the patterns whatever line they had listed, like a fourth turn or a quarter or a half inch. I have marked that on the back sides of my pattern. Let me get one to show you. Okay, so this, I am using waterproof canvas for the inside of my purse. This is like a snake print. So on the back side of the pattern, I have already marked from the pattern print the inside here. So if I have to glue anything, I know I'm gluing here to fold down at that ½ inch mark, right? And around and so on. Now, also for the material itself, if you're going to be using stabilizer, which you should, I have already placed the stabilizer piece on this part of the gusset only because I'm using what do you call it, adhesive type stabilizer where you iron it on versus the stabilizer that you have to glue on. So when we get started with the pattern, and the only reason I did it too, so I know some of you probably have seen me on Facebook with my mistake I made with the first bag that I had made by Cee Jay, a different pattern. I went ahead and put all my stabilizer on first, and I should not have, right? Because of trying to sew the bag. It made it very wonky. My stitching was horrible, all of that. The reason I did it with this bag is because you're putting all these pieces on first before you start to sew. So that's the only reason I did it, and then we'll end up gluing things down, right? So I didn't want to do and glue all my stabilizer on here because it's the sewing, or excuse me, the iron-on kind of stabilizer. So it just takes some of the time off for me, okay? And then not having to use so much glue and that smell. But if you're going to use glue for everything, I'll outline as we're going through, okay, you'll need to take this piece and actually put your glue on, put it aside so it can start setting, you know, and then you'll come back and merge it together or fold it over, whatever it needs to do. So as we go through the pattern, and I will tell you, this is only my second time making the bag, okay? So I am not a pro at this. It's just to kind of help and give you some direction on how I do it and how I was successful with the bag. So don't think that the way that I do it is the way, right? I will try and follow Cee Jay's pattern to a T, and I'll note where you need to glue this piece. I've already ironed mine on, but you need to glue it, or if you have some iron-on stabilizer at this time, you want to go ahead and iron it on. You know, that type of thing, okay? Everything else that I did not iron on, I will glue, and you'll see that process as well. Now, another part of the pattern, oh, and let me just make sure I mention this. When you're starting out learning how to sew purses and things like that, if the pattern piece has a name, which it does, or a letter, start putting that either on the back side or the front side on some tape until you get acclimated with making the bag and learning what these names and terms are. And that will help you with picking up the right piece when it's time to put something together. Because a lot of times in the patterns, and some people who write the patterns for these bags, they will say, take piece A1, add it to piece A2, or sew, you know, the A1 and A2 together, you know, however. And it's just easier to say, okay, let me pick up A2. I have it listed here. This is A1 or this is A2, right? It just helps you get acclimated with the pattern pieces before you start to sew. Now, I'm a visual person, so I start to memorize shapes or what the pattern pieces names or what they look like. But for this video, I just want to kind of show you what may help you along the way. Because when I first started out, I was stumbling a little bit, right? Just trying to learn what these terms was, like a gusset. What is a gusset, right? So I figured, let me start writing some of this stuff down so I can retain it a little bit better, right? And also learning and following the pattern, it helps me as well. So after I've done a pattern probably 2 times, then I start to memorize how to do it, and I really won't have to use the pattern. But for this sake of the video, because again, I've only used it, I made this purse once. Oh, we're gonna follow that pattern step by step, okay, today. So, but that was just a little plug to give you, you know, as you're starting out. It will really help if you label your pieces. Now, something that I also do is I lay all my pieces out on the table. And then sometimes if I don't feel like writing this, I will take the pattern piece and lay it on top, right? So as the pattern or the instructions calls for the main panel part or part 1 of whatever, I can go to the table here and pick up that piece, right? But I just wanted to kind of show you something that may help you along the way if you're just getting started too with you know, sewing and or making purses. Now, parts of the pattern that you'll need to make sure you keep out is your piece A2, because it's going to have your holes for placement for your grommets on the top of the purse. Okay, so across this bridge, we're going to actually have 4 of them that will be on this top piece. I only did 2 on mine because I didn't have the right chain in stock. So using what I had, and that chain was kind of short, so I'm like, let me just do 2. Okay, so keep that handy. You also want to have your piece B handy because it has the cutout here for where you're going to place your turn lock. Okay, so you need to have that out. And then also there's another piece that's going to help you once we start to get the front panel completely together, okay? Because we're going to start out sewing a front piece of the pattern here. Like so, this white piece, we're going to start out first sewing this on the purse to make the complete panel piece, which will end up being like this, okay? Oops, this way. And what you'll need to do is use this piece as your guide, because that's where you're going to end up placing your stabilizer on that particular sheet. So I have not placed my stabilizer down yet. This is my piece as a stabilizer. You know, I have it cut, but I have to wait to put this on until I have that whole front panel ready to go. So you can either glue it on or you can iron it on at that time, okay? So again, I'm going to try and make it as easy as possible. I will throw in suggestions and or what helped me along the way, right? So again, I'm putting this plug in. I am not a professional sewer. I've only been sewing for 7 months. I think I do pretty well for what I want to do, right, with making the purses. But I am not a professional by any means. So if there are things that I'm doing when I'm sewing that's probably not the right sew etiquette or the right way to do something, that's just my way. So don't come at me if you are an advanced sewer and you see that I'm doing something a little different than what or how it really should be done. It's because I'm still learning too, okay? So I make my videos to kind of help the person who is kind of at a basic level coming in, because I needed that when I started sewing, right? And we join a lot of these Facebook groups, and some groups are very helpful with giving some hints and suggestions and answering questions, and some are not, right? So I try to do things that can help the next person. And also, if it's a little shortcut that does not impact the purse in a bad way, that I can give a tidbit on, I'll give that, right? So we're going to go ahead at this time and get started with trying to sew this. I won't say trying. We are going to make this purse. So go ahead and get everything situated. Turn off your cell phone so you have no interruptions. And we're going to get started with sewing. Okay? Okay, so let's go ahead and get started so we can sew this purse up. Okay, so the first things you want to pull together are your 3 pieces of your stabilizer. This is your A1, A2, and A3. You're going to go ahead, if you do not have the iron-on adhesive type of stabilizer, then you will need to glue this on. So you'll take your glue. You're going to glue the entire side, put glue on the entire side of all 3 pieces, okay? And then set it aside. Now, I'm not going to put glue on this because once we sew this next piece together, what I'm going to do is take a break a second and iron on mine when I have the whole piece ready to go, okay? So at this point, if you have not done anything yet, go ahead and put the glue on this, all 3 of these pieces, A1, A2, and A3 of your stabilizer. Okay, and when you do, just set them aside so that they can start, the glue can start working on it, right? All right, so the next step of what we're going to do is we are going to take our piece, which is the D, the V-shaped little piece that you have cut. On the back, you should have major trace of the 1/4 inch marking around the sides, just like it is on the pattern. Okay, so you should have that marked because we're going to actually now take some double-sided tape and we're going to place that on our piece here. So with your double-sided tape, you want to place it on top of the line that you drew, okay? Not in the body of the 1/4 inch, but on top of the line. So let me get my tape here and I'll show you. Because when you tape this, you're just going to tape up to making sure that you're not taping a 1/2 inch or anything like that. You want to truly tape just the 1/4 inch of it. So I'll show you here. So I have put my tape inside. So this was my line and I just placed the top of the tape, the edge of the tape, on the line. Okay, so I did it on both sides. So you should have a V that looks just like this. Okay, so once you do that, now we're going to peel the tape off and we're going to press these sides down. And then if you have in the middle, you're going to have a little piece that pops up in the middle and we're going to cut that flush, okay? So I'm just going to like push the tape down a little bit more on my fabric so that the glue can really set in and adhere to it. Okay, so now I'm just going to peel my tape off and hopefully this glue would have set. And sometimes, you know, I got this glue off of Amazon, so, or excuse me, this tape off of Amazon. So other places may sell some really, really good quality double-sided tape where it's not so hard to peel off. Sometimes I'll use my little pick that I have from my my days of using my Cricut to start it off, because sometimes the tape is just really hard to peel off. Okay, so now all I'm going to do is, let me just move this up some so you can see. is just start folding in so that my edge just comes right up to the line of the tape. So as you can see, I've started folding in, right? So I'm just folding in here to put that little piece that we've marked off as a 1/4 inch on top of the tape. Now, I'll tell you, it won't stay down all the time, depending upon what kind of tape you're using, and the material that you're using as well. So this is when I'll sometimes pull my clips together and just to keep it kind of in place for a little bit until, you know, we get it sewed, right? It just aggravates me to see it popped up. So I'm just gonna tape both sides down. And again, I told you these clips, some of them are good, some are bad. So I'm gonna have to probably go tomorrow to like Office Max or Office Depot and buy me some of the regular paper clips. So I can start using those, because these clips are not good at all. Okay, I'm just about finished taping the other side. And I'll show you when you get to the little V point, you know, you're going to want to clip it so that you can have it flushed. And I'll show you what I mean. Let me just put some of this clip on here. Okay, so when you get to the center part, you have this little piece, right, that is just pointed and standing up, right here. So all I'm going to do is just take my scissors, push down on this, right, to where it has a little piece that's up in the air. And I'm just going to clip that straight across to make it flushed. I'm just going to use my little tiny scissors to get in here so that I know I'm not cutting too much off. So you're just cutting it enough to where you could just push this down, and now you have a flat V right here. Your point is flat. Okay, you don't have all that excess hanging up. Okay, so the next step of what we're going to do is now we're going to take our main exterior panel. That's the one that looks like it has a V shape cut out of it already. So if you're going by your letters or numbers, it is your E1/E2 that's put together. It is called the main exterior. It has this V shape. We're going to take this. What we're going to do is take some more tape and just trail it across the edge here of the V, because we're going to end up placing this piece right on it and sewing it. Okay. So go ahead and get your tape and put it on, and I'm just placing, and I have a little bit of an edge at the top where this doesn't quite go all the way to the top, just a little bit off, but it's okay because we can shape it around. So go ahead and get the rest of your tape and tape your inside V right on the outside of the top portion of your material. Okay. Now, and this is where I talked about too, making sure you have your acetone or your alcohol ready, because we are using quite a bit of tape to start off with, and it's going to make your needle pretty sticky because you are going to sew through this tape. And that's the only reason I hate using double-sided tape, is because how it impacts or affect, you know, your needle. I hate it. So I just like to run my nail or something across the top of the tape so that it makes sure that it is actually adhering to the material. Okay. And now we're going to go ahead and pull that up and place this V that we've just taped down on top. And then we're going to sew that. Okay, so I've pulled my tape off. Now I just want to turn this to where I can take this piece and I want to adhere it by just placing this piece on top of the tape. Okay, just to hide the tape and then placing down on it. Now, if you're using actual material, you know, if you want, you can put a little stick pin through it just to kind of hold it in place. You know, I'm using vinyl. You may be using vinyl and or leather, and you know you don't want to puncture holes in that material, right? So what I normally do when I get it kind of where I need it to be, I just place a clip on the end at the top just to hold it in place as well. And let me just do the other side. And make sure you're placing it on top of that tape so your tape will not be shown. Okay? Because this part is a part of your front flap. So you want to make sure that it is not going to be shown through your purse when you sew it. Alright, so this is what we have. We now have our rounded top portion of the pattern piece. So this is the entire pattern. If you turn it over the back side, this is what it looks like. Okay, you can see your V of what you put in. So now we're going to go ahead to our sewing machine and we are going to sew this across the top, just the V. Okay, we're just going to sew this V down. So just sew straight across the top to the middle portion of the V and then back up to the top. Okay, just sew that in place. So if you're following from the pattern, we are sewing at 1/8 of an inch top stitching. Okay, I like to back stitch, and you may want to get in the habit of back stitching when you sew as well. Now I am sewing on a domestic Singer heavy duty 6800C sewing machine. And it's just, I'm telling you this because I just want you to know a lot of times you don't have to purchase an industrial sewing machine because some of these more upgraded sewing machines can handle layers of fabric, thick layers of fabric. This machine is supposed to be equipped to handle 10 layers of fabric. Okay, and you know, take your time to make sure that you have a nice stitch. It's not a race. So, you know, just if you're starting out, I would just tell you to your sewing speed on your machine. You might want to make it a little slower so you can't go too fast. But, you know, it's just up to you. But I just try not to go too fast when I'm trying to sew little small areas. And, you know, I'm just continuously pushing down from what's rising from the tape. Okay. So I'm coming up to my V, so I'm just going to place my needle down and I'm going to turn it and then come back and sew across the next side of it up to the top. And then I'm going to back stitch. So this is what we have. This top V has now been sewn onto our main panel. Okay, so that's now attached. Okay, so now the next thing of what you're going to do is, and you'll notice in the pattern or in other patterns, you know, they will make reference and saying, using the acronyms or initials like WSU, RSU, that type of thing. RSU means right side up, meaning the material is the right side up. Okay? WSU means the wrong side is up. Okay, so the wrong side would be the back of your material. So what the pattern is telling us to do is to place our material now on the wrong side. You want to measure around 1/2 of an inch all the way around this. This is where your main panel guide is going to come in handy, because we're going to use this to trace around. Okay, so you want to position this to where it's basically 1/2 an inch around. Now I know when I cut this, I still have like a little space in between where the lines meet, right? So when I actually trace, I'm going to trace up just a little bit more, because at the bottom, my bottom piece goes just about to the end, and I know I need to mark 1/2 inch, okay? But you want to make sure you go around your fabric 1/2 of an inch all the way around. So I'm just going to take my ruler too, just to make sure for the first part of the placement that it really is at 1/2 of an inch on the outside, and that looks good. And sometimes you can gauge it for your 1/2 inches. Once you start sewing quite a bit, you'll know how much is 1/2 or 1/4, you know, that type of thing. Okay. But I still like to use my ruler just to confirm, because I want to make sure that I'm not shorting anything when it comes down to these patterns. Okay, so I'm just going to go around just a little bit just to make sure. So, okay, so how I have it positioned so far is definitely right at 1/2 of an inch, with the exception of the bottom portion down here. Okay, because as you can see, and it's just based upon how I cut this and how I taped it. Okay, so I'm going to measure, when I get to the bottom, I'm going to measure where my 1/2 inch is. So I make sure that I curve it right on this piece. Okay, so what I want to do next is take my chalk, and I'm going to start outlining my 1/2 inch. I'm just tracing on or from this pattern onto the back of this main panel. Okay, so I've traced 1/2 of it. I'm going to turn this over to the other side and complete my tracing. Okay. And then what I'm going to also do is take my ruler just to make sure I'm staying in sync with my measurement before I start to trace again. So that's at 1/2 inch there. And from the edge of how I've placed this, okay, it's also right there at 1/2 inch. Let me just see up here. Yeah. Okay. All right, so I'm going to complete my tracing around. And if you have the little points at the end, you can just cut that. I'm going to end up cutting mine to make it rounded. Okay. But let me just finish getting this down, this side down here, traced for the 1/2 inch mark. And like I said, when I'm coming down to this end here, I know at the bottom, I'm just going to make a mark where my 1/2 inch should be. So right around here. Okay, so this is where I'm going to place my paper again so that I can ensure that I have my curve put in here. And again, it's a guide for where your stabilizer is going to go. Okay, so I just want to make sure I have it all in and the correct height of it, so it's no problems at the end. Okay, so I have the outline completely traced with, you know, the position, right, and the placement. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, again, take this. I'm going to place it on here because I want to know where I should end and begin with my pieces, because it's 3 pieces, right? Remember, you just glued your A1, A2, and A3, right? And that's going to really matter with the placement because of the fact that you have to glue it in the right position so that the purse fold will fold accurately as well. Okay, so I'm going to just take my ruler here and just draw my line from line to line so I know where my middle positioning is for that middle piece and from the top piece. Oops, yeah, I might need to get some more chalk. Okay. Oops. And there's a bit of a hump in there from the way my fabric is created. So anyways, I just, you know, blocked off how or where each piece to the stabilizer should go. So at this time, what you will do, if you're using 100% glue and you're not using the stabilizer as what I have as well, you are going to put glue on this side and let it sit for about 4 minutes or so that it can rest and start to form the stickiness of the glue so it can adhere to the other 3 pieces that you have already placed glue on. So you have already placed glue on these 3 pieces. What I'm going to do is pause here to allow you time to glue. I'm going to go to the iron and I'm going to iron my pieces on because, again, mine is adhesive type stabilizer. Okay, so we'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back. I have my pieces adhered to my main panel. Okay, so you would have glued your material piece all on the wrong side, and you would have taken your stabilizer 3 pieces and glued those on the opposite side. Okay, and so now you have all 3 pieces here. So now, even if you folded it, you will have a nice crease of how your purse top will carry over, right, to the front. So that's really nice so far. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we have to now bring in the folds of all the edges. So all around the edges of this purse, we need to fold in and glue on here. So I'm going to take my glue and I'm going to glue all around on the fabric. And then I'm going to make sure I glue at least a ½ inch on top of my stabilizer all the way around the entire sheet, okay? Because I need for my edges to be able to fold over and adhere to the glue. Now you can use, if you don't want to use glue, you can also use your double-sided tape, right? You just want to make sure that it is going to stick. And I'm just going to cut my edges just to make them rounded, you know, so when gluing down, that's all. I just want to make sure my edging was completely flush like it's supposed to be. Okay, so let me take my glue, you take your glue, go ahead and do this piece. Okay. And then we'll move on. We'll let this rest a second so that once you get your glue on, we'll let it sit for a couple minutes. And while that's sitting, we'll start on the next one that we have to glue so that that can start resting. Because we just want to keep the motion going. Okay. So I'm just going to take my glue and I'm just going to start gluing. So the way that I'm brushing my glue on, I'm brushing it in a way to where it is hitting both pieces at the same time. Okay. I don't like to do stuff over and over. So I try to make sure that I can hit mine at the same time. So as you can see, I have glue that is on the stabilizer, and then I have glue on the material. Okay, so again, you want to make sure that you get at least a 1/2 inch of glue on your stabilizer. So go ahead and do that all the way around. And once we get this on this piece, then we're going to go ahead and glue our next piece while this is resting before we attempt to turn it over. Okay, so just make sure that you do have enough glue on. It does not have to be thick. I thin mine out. I just want to make sure that it's on both pieces so that it will stick. And keeping in mind too, you know, you're just trying to lay this down so it makes a nice good edge, because you will sew it as well. But this makes, you know, for your purse to have the nice crisp edging all around. Because remember, we're not birthing this bag like some of the other purses that, you know, we sew, where we turn it inside out when we sew it, and therefore we birth it. So therefore all your seams and everything are sewn from the inside, and it has that nice crispness to it. Well, with this one, we don't do it that way. So this is why you need to glue your edges. And you don't, like I said, you don't have to use a lot of glue. A little bit goes a long way. It's just making sure you have the glue though on both sides so that it can stick. Okay, so I'm just now going across this side, the top part, and then the other side. I've already done one side and the bottom. Okay. And normally I do this over at my table so that I can just, you know, I have enough room to lay everything out. This sewing table that I'm using, I also have my embroidery machine on it. So I just don't have a lot of room to work with as a work table on my sewing table. So I have another table here in the center of my room where I do, you know, all my work on. So when I'm in here by myself, I put on my podcast or music and work from the center of the room and get my stuff sewn up together. And just, you know, you may want to, if you don't feel like you have a steady hand when gluing, so that you don't, you know, mess up your good tables and stuff, you could put down some paper, you know, craft paper or something so that you can glue on top of. Okay, so here, all the sides, the edges of the material and the edges of my stabilizer has glue on it. I'm going to set this aside for a second so that it can kind of start activating, okay? What I'm going to do next is, because we still got to glue some more pieces to keep this going. So you want to go ahead and get your piece F, your front exterior, okay? Now, you need to go ahead and glue your stabilizer. Put glue on the other side, the wrong side of the stabilizer, and the wrong side of your material so that it can adhere to it, okay? So use piece B as your trace for where your stabilizer needs to go, your area. So here is your print here. You will then trace all the way around, and your stabilizer needs to go in that box, okay? And it will end up being a 1/2 inch around. And then therefore, once you have that all that glue on, we're going to end up gluing in these edges as well. So when you're putting your glue on your fabric the wrong side, put glue all over that fabric, okay? From edge to edge, all over. Put glue all over your stabilizer, edge to edge, so that you can adhere them together. So all that I'm going to do at this point is put glue around my edges. Okay, and by the time I finish gluing around my edges, I'm going to pick back up my main piece to put my edges down while this is setting. So we're going to have two things in motion going on, okay? So we're getting this piece ready, and while our main panel is activating, by the time we finish gluing this, that main panel should be ready for us to push those edges down. Okay. So I'm just getting my glue on here all the way around. And again, a little goes a long way. You do not have to glob it on. So I put it on and then I start to smooth it out. And again, just making sure I have enough on my stabilizer piece to catch from my edges that I'm going to wrap around. And then after we get this piece glued, we're going to prepare the marking for our turn lock and install the turn lock. So I'll tell you, I was, I'm normally using like snaps on my purses and or zippers, right? I'd never used turn lock before until I made this purse. And when I tell you I was extremely nervous, because I'd never done it before, I was extremely nervous. But it actually ended up being so easy to do. The only part I hate about it is trying to cut out that square to where, the material is not showing within that hole, right? And it's more so for the piece on the front panel where the turn lock plate goes through that I don't like. And it's just my cutting skills with that piece. I need some more practice on that. Okay, so I'm just about finished putting the glue onto this piece. And like I said, I'm just going to set it aside. And I'm going to pick back up that main panel that we just glued all around the edges. And we're going to start pushing those edges down. Okay. So here I have glue all along this side. And this is piece F. Okay, from the pattern. The front panel, the main front panel. Okay, so I'm going to just set this down, pick back up my main wraparound. So I'm now back with this piece. And now what I'm going to start doing is folding my edges in. You want to start with your sides first and then do your bottoms and your top, okay? So I'm just going to start pushing in. And you'll notice, because that glue has started activating, it has set really well. So you shouldn't have to use clips or anything like that once you push your glue over. Okay, so again, you're just trying to get your edges good and crisp for your purse. So just to show you one side, I have pulled over the edging and I have pushed it down onto that glue, okay? All right, I'm going to now do the second side. And it's adhering nicely because both pieces, or both sides, I should say, of the glue had enough time to set. And then when we come to the corners, we're going to do the same thing like we did with the triangle of the top panel. We're going to pinch and then cut to make sure that the fabric is flushed at the corners. Okay, so I'm going to start with the bottom side here, in the middle of the bottom, pushing my fabric up and working my way to the outside corner. And then now you can see here in the outside, I'm picking this up at the pinch. Okay, so I'm going to go for the rest of the side around here, and I have pinched this together where it meets. So you can see I have two pieces, that piece like that, that's standing up, that's pinched together. We'll end up cutting that down to make it flushed with the pattern. Okay, so let me just do the top, and then I'd like to do all my cutting at the same time. Just a little anal like that. So I'm just going across the top, getting everything pushed down to my corner, and then flushing that also. Okay. Okay. So all I'm going to do now is where the pinch is, I'm just going to come down here and cut at the base. I'm resting my scissors on the base of the material, and I just cut straight across, okay, at that pinch. So it made for it to be nice and flushed, okay, against the board. So there's nothing that's standing up. It's nice and flushed. So you'll do that to all four sides. And again, I just find it easier to do when resting my scissors onto the material. Okay. All right. Okay, so I have my points, and all, this is my outer side, and this is my inside. So all I'm gonna do now is just form the shape of the purse. Just to make sure the shape is looking like it should. Okay. And here we go. So this is going to be the top spine. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to go back, and here is how it looks, okay? So now I'm going to pick up my other piece that we just glued here, and I'm going to do the same thing. So start from the sides, both sides, folding in, then your top and bottom fold in, get your pinches on the corner and clip those. Okay. And so what we're on, if you're following from the panel, or excuse me, from the pattern and the instructions, we are on now step number 5 with your front panel. Okay. So let me just get this going. And so with this glue and stuff, it just really takes, like my glue, it takes about 4 minutes for it to rest to where you can start using it to push towards, you know, get everything nicely pushed down. Okay, let me do my top and my bottom and snip. And then we'll be ready to place the turn lock onto this piece. The turn lock is going to actually go onto this piece. And the part that we're going to end up putting on this piece will be the male piece. So, you know, even if you're not using a turn lock and you're using a snap, it will be your male piece of your snap that's going to go on here as well. Okay. And you know your male pieces to your turn lock and or your snap is the prong that sticks out. That is your male piece. Okay. And this is the last one I need to cut. Okay. Alright, so I have my pieces cut. Okay, so the next thing, like I said, that we're going to do is get our placement for our turn lock. So we need to get the piece B, okay, and then figure out too which side is going to be your top or your bottom when it comes down to your turn lock. So I'm just looking. Okay, I'm going to have mine like this. Put your piece wrong side up. Okay, wrong side up. Get your piece B, your pen or pencil. Place this over your square. Okay. And draw your piece here that you need to use for your turn lock. Now, and this is where I kind of ran into an issue too the last time that I did it. Make sure that your corner, whatever's going to be your bottom, make sure your bottom piece has the rounded corner, okay? When I glued mine, I glued it all around like squares. But I'm forcing this now into be round. But you would have cut your material rounded. So when you folded, it should have kind of folded rounded as well. So I'm just forcing it into a round shape because that's going to be the bottom of my purse. Because I want to make sure when I, you know, put this against the other piece from the gusset that everything just fits like it's supposed to, being rounded. Okay, so I've just rounded my corners here on both sides. Okay, here is where I have my square marked so I can put my male piece on. Okay, so let me get my male piece and the backing for my male piece. So you should have two pieces. You should have this piece, which is like your washer, and then this is your male piece. The actual turn lock is your male piece. Okay, and I just always make sure that the distance is right. So from what my turnkey prongs are, I just always set them on the place here. So I know that, okay, it's in balance. So what I'm going to do is get one of my seam rippers. And all I'm going to do is cut a slit right on the side, like probably up to the middle of both lines on the side where my prongs will go through. Okay. So I'm going to just use, like I said, use my seam ripper and go into the middle and go up just a bit, because my prong for my turn lock is not the complete length of this square that we cut. So I just don't want it all sliding or, you know, just all over the place. So I'm just cutting enough that that prong will be able to go through. Okay, then what I also do, I like to place, when I put my prongs through here and my washers on, I like to place masking tape over it too. Just so that when my material for my inside lining is put on, it doesn't, like, if whatever happens with the prongs, you know, sometimes this stuff, this metal stuff starts to poke through. So you just want to make sure you're securing the prong so that it doesn't rip or have an effect on your material, your inside material. Okay? So, and what I like to also do with it is to put a strip of stabilizer behind it. So I have little pieces of stabilizer cut that's here in my little nook of my sewing machine. So I can always pull a piece out just so I can put on when I put the washer on. So all I'm going to do is draw the lines of where the washer is going to come through on the stabilizer, and I'll cut those slits. And so I'll show you by putting this on to the bag. Okay. All right, so now what I'm going to do is take my turn lock. I'm going to push it from the front of the bag, and I can kind of see where my cuts are. Okay, so I'm pushing the prongs through, so you can see the prongs are here. Come through my bag, right? Then I am going to put my stabilizer through the prongs, through the stabilizer first before I put the washer on. And so this will secure the outside fabric, as well as when I put the masking tape on, it's going to secure the inside fabric. Okay? So now I'm just going to push mine. And these prongs hurt. So I normally take my scissors for these. These are not like the, you know, the, what do you call it? The snap prongs that we use. Oh my God. It's not like that or those. These are really tight, and they actually hurt when you try and push them down with your fingers. So I've gotten this in and got my prongs pushed down, making sure my turn lock is truly stable. I can push this down a little bit more. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is get my masking tape and I am going to secure these prongs so that they don't rip my inside lining. And so I just buy, you know, a lot of this stuff you can buy over at the Dollar Tree, so you're not wasting a lot of money on supplies. I buy these rolls of masking tape from the Dollar Tree for $1, well, $1.25 now. So I'll put a strip on that way, and then I'm going to go back over it across the top. Okay? Just to secure. So therefore, it is plushed here, so it's flushed, and these prongs won't come through and bother with my inside lining of the purse. And then my turn lock here is on the outside. Okay? All right. So now what we're going to work on is the gusset panel. So we're going to take our main gusset piece of our material, and more glue. So what we're going to do is, if you have not already done so, you would have drawn the outline, like trace the outline of where your stabilizer for your gusset should go. You're going to put glue, if you're gluing, all on the opposite side of your gusset, along with glue on the inside of the traced area of your fabric, and let it set, right? So that it can adhere. I went ahead and ironed on my stabilizer. So now what I'm going to do is take the glue, and I'm going to put glue all around the edges, just like we did previously with the panels. I am going to put the glue all around, okay? So you go ahead and do that while I do this. And maybe when you're putting your glue on, maybe turn your brush sideways, because in that way you're not getting so much glue on your stabilizer that's not being used. Although it won't really matter, but you know, I don't like to waste product because this stuff costs too much. So you want to save as much as you can. And for those of you who may have respiratory issues, you know, sometimes starting out using this glue is a bit much. Can cause you to have, you know, asthma attacks, things like that. Just wear your masks, right? When you're putting these glue or using the glue or any type of strong product, even if you know, get into other types of crafting items where it requires you to use epoxy or glue, just get in the habit of putting your masks on. Like, I honestly should be using a mask with this. I'm kind of used to it now, but still, I really should be using a mask because this glue here is strong as all get out. Okay. Now, one thing to note too, and I think what helps my glue dry pretty quickly too, is I have my ceiling fan going here in the room also. Right, so when I set this on my table, that ceiling fan, I do believe, is helping it to cure quick, and that's why it's kind of easier for my glue to dry. So if you have a window you can open, because you need to have ventilation here in the room too when using these strong products. So just make sure you're protecting yourself. And it doesn't have to be all perfect. But again, I'm pretty anal, so I have to make it as perfect as possible. Because again, you're going to turn this in and you're going to end up sewing it, you know, to the panel. So you have a little spot here and there that you don't really catch with glue. It is okay because the majority of your panel, you know, will be glued and turned to where you can just sew without an issue. But because of the way my brain works, I have to make sure every little piece is covered. Okay, I just have one more little piece to glue. And then we're going to set this aside for a second just to let it activate. And look to see what is our next step. Okay, so I'm just going to set this down for a second just to let that glue activate and see what our next step is. And so what we're going to end up doing next is stitching our little small piece that we just put the male part of our turn lock on, and we're going to sew that onto the gusset that we just put this. Okay, so my apologies. I did not know that my camera or my video had stopped recording. So all that I've done is I've taken my gusset that we started gluing all around, and I just pushed all my sides down. And now I'm ready to clip my corners. Okay, so if you have not already done so, go ahead and clip your corners. Oops, making sure that they're flushed. Okay, now what you want to do next, because you're going to then take your, which flap here? We're going to take our front panel that we put the male part on for our turn lock, and we're going to take this and we're going to place them together to formulate the shape of the bag. So first, what you want to do is you got to measure out for your middle or your center pieces to your pattern. Okay, so what I like to do, like I said before too, a lot of people like to clip the ends. Once they get this together, they'll clip the ends there for their center markings. I don't like to clip too much because it can you know, clip the material and start it to unravel and things. So I just go inside and I mark it with a pen, and then once I see where my center is here, I could take my, if it's dark material, I could take my ruler, right, and place it where that center line is. And then if I need additional you know, help in knowing where the centers are, then take my chalk and mark on the fabric. Okay, otherwise, if this was not dark, I would have taken my pen and marked on the fabric as well. But because I'm using a black pen, it's kind of hard to see. So I'm just going to mark this with my chalk also. And this is just going to help a little bit too as I go to place the next piece on to the gusset. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is get my piece that has the turn lock on, and this is called your piece F, your front exterior where we put the actual turn lock on. I want to do the same thing. I need to find my center, so I'm just pushing down where the center would be, and it's kind of hard there where my turn lock is, but we're gonna make it work. Okay, so I can see in here where my center fold pieces are. Okay, I'm also going to take my pen also and just draw a little line there, and then at the top I'm going to do the exact same thing. Okay, now what we're going to do, you're going to take your gusset, okay, and just to kind of see, here are my lines, marking my lines where my center pieces are, where it would actually connect, okay, like this. So what we're going to do is keep the wrong side up of the gusset so that you can see your interfacing, or I should say your stabilizer. Then we're going to flip this over, this piece over, okay, and this we're going to mat or line up our centerpiece line, okay, and we're going to fold over. So this is going to be wrong sides touching. The wrong side of my piece F, my main panel, with my turn lock, and the wrong side of the gusset. Okay, those are going to touch, and we're going to clip those into place. Because what we're going to end up doing is clipping this up the side to build a purse so that we can sew the outside of this purse. Okay, so I'm just putting the little clips just to keep everything stable here. And then I'll show you how to attach this up against the side. So what I now have is my front panel connected to my gusset by my clips, okay? So all I'm going to do now is take this piece and curve it, bring it up to the top, okay, match my ends, and I'm going to start clipping all the way around, okay? And I'll do the same thing with my other side. So I'm just making sure my top ends meet and clip that into place. Okay, now I'm going to start clipping the edges of the side together, making sure it is equally placed. So one side does not hang over more than the other side. It matches together. And see, I just broke one because it's a little thick with the material that I'm using. Okay, and see, here is where I mentioned about that rounded corner. Make sure you get in there good. Make sure your rounds are round and meeting roundly. Okay, because you're going to have to sew that together. And like I said, with when we were gluing, you know, I had pushed my edge down to where it kind of was a square. So I'm just going to see if I can lift just a little bit to make it more rounder. But you'll want to make sure that your end piece is truly round. Okay. Alright, so, and this material is a little tight that I decided to use. It's tighter than the other piece I used the other day. So I'm just trying to get that pushed as close as I can, oops, without breaking these, as I mentioned. Okay. And if, oh goodness, and if everything is measured like it's supposed to, it will fit without much manipulation. Okay. But again, I just want to make sure my corner piece gets in here very well. My ends meet, my edges meet, and that's fine. I gotta get to the store tomorrow to get me those clips. Because these other plastic ones are a hot mess. I keep breaking them. Okay. I'm just trying to get as much as I can, you know, clip nicely, so that way when we start to sew, it's just a seamless sew. That corner, I'm just going to tell you off the bat, this corner is, for me, is a beast to sew. It was a beast to sew it when I did the first time around. It could be because of the choice of material I'm using. Also, I'm using a domestic, and you know, you look on a lot of those industrial machines, like right here on your machine is cut off, so it's easier to be able to manipulate and sew, right? So if you're working with a domestic, when it's time to go around those edges, you may have to stop and come back to the edge piece to sew that separately if your machine will not turn right. Okay. So just be advised. That's the problem I had with this machine. So now I'm just doing my other side and getting it lined up. Because once we have it lined up and in place, we are going to sew this 1/8 of an inch around connecting. Okay? Alright, let's see here. If I can get that to stick and stay. And again, I'm trying to push these corners down a little bit because, like I said, the rounding piece with my rounding doesn't really match up. I have more of a square point, So just make sure when you're cutting your material and turning it, you know, when you're gluing it, just make sure you're gluing it round. And what you can also do is, and what I should have done is snip little clips in the corners so that I could fold it in and make it round. That's what I should have done, right? But it still will turn out nicely. I've manipulated it, the material, enough to where I've pushed it in to where it will appear as a round. Let me just correct this corner piece a little bit more to get that in to where it is like a round piece. Okay. All right. So you can see here on my front part, I've pushed this front part in to where the rounding is there. Okay. And I've done the same thing here on this end. So what we're going to do at this point is take this to your machine. This is what it should look like. This is your back opening. And this is the front. Okay. So what we're going to do now is just take this to the machine, and we are going to stitch this 1/8 of an inch going around the sides, the bottom, and back up the other side. Okay. So it's just a top stitch connecting the panels together, because again, we are not birthing this bag. So go ahead and start sewing, and then we will return back and move on to the next step.